your way of not thinking too much?
Do you really think it's your mental processes which is creating a problem for you?
No, the fact that I think too much.
Even if you're bursting forth with thought, suppose you have the most active mind on the planet, why should that become a cause of problem for you?
Because I second guess and I...
Suppose you had a mind which was tremendously active and efficient, where you could just act and your action is in such a way that you're not becoming enslaved or entangled in the process. Would your thought processes be a problem for you?
If I would act without being entangled?
Yes.
No.
So that is essentially the problem.
Being
is
entangled.
That while the mind is active and while you're employing your thought processes, you're getting highly entangled in the process. What that means is you've lost your clarity. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about a loss of clarity. Now, why isn't it possible for you to be able to use the mind and the body, yet at the same time your clarity is preserved? That is a possibility. So, absence of thoughts or the presence of thoughts, where there is clarity within you, then either way your freedom remains undisturbed. So, do we just want to eliminate thoughts? Maybe you would. It'll bring you some temporarily silence and contentment within you. But we should understand this. Something can only be truly understood through acceptance, not through rejection. If there's a machine that's working here, and I want to have an understanding of what is the mechanism of this machine, what do I do? Should I pull out the electrical switch, or should I let it run its course? And then observing from a distance. Like that, the mechanism of your own mind, if you really want to have understanding into it, we have to have total acceptance. So, this is the usual tendency of human life. What we find pleasant, we want to gravitate towards it. What we find unpleasant, we want to gravitate away from it. But we need to understand something about the nature of this mind. The nature of this mind is in such a way that it's just like a sponge. A sponge is just absorbing everything. Everything that's coming into you, it simply absorbs. So, whether you're aware of it or unaware of it, this can be demonstrated. Suppose you're in a deep sleep, and there's the sound of running water in the background. When you come back to your wakefulness, this is something psychologists know, he can put you in a certain state of hypnosis and make you remember exactly what it is you had experienced. Because that's how this mind is. This mind is just like a sponge, just absorbing everything. So something is arising within you which you dislike, and you think, okay, I can escape from it. So you want to repress it, you want to keep it hidden, but it doesn't disappear. What happens is it just shifts down into your unconscious mind, and then it picks up force, it gathers force there. So this is why you'll see people, for example, who are repressing sexual desire. Day by day, they go on repressing it, repressing it, repressing it. One day it builds up such intensity within them that it just explodes. So we don't want you to have a repressed mind. You don't like them, whatever stories your mind is inventing. But by repressing it, that's not a solution. So we want a solution, and the solution can only come through insight. As far as I'm concerned, the quality of insight, when you see what is happening within you clearly, its quality is just like medicine. It has this transformative quality. So for that, what is it that preserves your clarity? To put it very simply, is when there comes just a small gap of distance within you between the observer and that which is observed. If just this small gap of distance arises, and you're not attaching the idea of I, me, or mine, thoughts are arising, thoughts are simply happening. You're not perceiving it as my thoughts. Emotion is arising, there's simply emotion. But again, you're not touching the idea of I, me, or mine. The moment the mind does that, then you're caught in what we call ego, the egotism. and look at it out of your own logic. So many of the problems of your life have always been directly connected to the ego, haven't it? So let's have a logical, systematic approach. Just look into this. Because you're not aware of what is your true nature. When I say your true nature, I mean something within you which cannot be created or destroyed. This body can be created and destroyed. This mind can also be created and destroyed. But if you're in tune with another realm within you, which is beyond birth and death, then we say you've come into union with your true nature. Now, out of ignorance of what is this nature, now you start creating a substitute, a false identity, a false persona. That's what we call ego, or the sense of I. Now, once this sense of I comes, then there comes the desire for self-preservation. You want to protect this limited identity. Once this self-preservation comes, out of that comes fear. Out of fear comes attachment. Out of attachment comes suffering. So that's the mechanism of suffering in your mind. And it has to be seen directly, as it is. As it is means as it's manifesting in this present moment. Past, you can never observe what's happening in the past. Future has not arrived. You will never be able to observe the future. If we want to have an understanding of insight into ourselves as we are, it's only possible through the door of this present moment. So, one part of being involved in the spiritual process means is that you are having a systematic approach to your well-being. Now just look at this. Why has modern science had such huge influence everywhere all over the world? Whether it's in America, whether it's in China, whether it's in India, whether it's in Australia. Why is it that modern science has had such mass influence? Because modern science, it doesn't care what beliefs you create in your mind. It doesn't care what philosophies you've created in your mind. Only thing modern science cares about is, can it be put to practical use? Do you understand it, and can you put it to practical use? So we have an external science to observe facts that are happening outwardly in the world. In exactly the same way, there's another kind of science to observe the facts that are happening within you, an internal science. And part of this science is what I call meditation. So, does that mean that logic is everything? No, logic cannot be everything. Because logic is limited, but within it, this small circle of logic, things can be reliable. If you can see the facts that are happening through this small circle, then your logic can be very reliable. So logic, it can only take you at the most to the seashore, but it cannot help you to travel the ocean. For that you need something else, another kind of intelligence. So oftentimes I know people think that intuition and reason are somehow opposites, like they're working against each other. That's impossible. Because let's look at this. Reason, rational mind, has evolved from instinct. The earliest intelligence that happened within life was instinct. And we've evolved from all the other animals. Modern science knows this also very well. The earliest part of the brain is at the very base of the brain in a place called the brain stem. This brain stem is very survival oriented, fight or flight, kill or be killed, reflexive kind of behavior. Evolving from the brain stem came the limbic system. Still we're within instinct, but limbic system is more emotional. Out of the limbic system evolved the irrational mind. So what I'm trying to say is there's a single intelligence within the human being, which is expanding itself from one dimension to the next, to the next. So just as reason has evolved out of instinct, in the same way, what we call intuitive intelligence, the intuitive mind, evolves out of reason. So how can they be opposite? They cannot be opposite. So, just to have a better understanding of what's involved, I think once I told you a story of, there was once a master who had a disciple, and this disciple, he was constantly, all the time, complaining about the miseries of his life. So, he told, one day the master just told him, okay, here's what you should do. Just go get a glass of water and some salt and bring it to me. So the disciple did as he was instructed. The master then told him, okay, just take a handful of salt and put it in the glass of water and have a drink. So the disciple had a drink. Then the master asked, tell me something, how does it taste? The disciple said, it tastes totally bitter. So then quietly the master and the disciple, they just walked outside to a lake. And the master said, okay, now do the same thing. Just take a handful of salt, swirl it in the water of the lake, and have a drink from the water. So once again, the disciple, he had a drink from the water. The master asked him, now tell me, how does it taste? The disciple said, oh, it tastes totally fresh. Then the master responded, he said, the pains and sufferings of your life, it's just like that. It's just like a handful of salt. Not more, not less. But if you enlarge your sense of being, if you enlarge your consciousness, if you enlarge the container, then there comes a freedom within you that remains undisturbed. So stop being like this limited glass of water. Become the vastness of the lake. So that's exactly what it is like when you're moving into higher and higher levels of consciousness. You find the more aware you become within yourself. With increasing awareness, there comes a decreasing sense of ego. You know, for example, that's what happens when you go to sleep. When you fall into unconsciousness, you're not aware, but the sense of ego within you has disappeared. But when you come back to your ordinary consciousness, you're the same human being with the same desires, the same attachments, and so on. So just as it is possible for you to move into lower unconsciousness, but the sense of ego is dissolving, in exactly the same way, it's possible for you to move into higher consciousness. And as you move into higher consciousness, the sense of ego gradually dissolves. So what I'm trying to say is that if life has to become an expression of freedom, one needs to move beyond this small, limited identity, because all the problems of life are created there. Does that mean you cannot have a personality? No. But assume your personality was highly flexible. In this moment, if you need to be a father, you're just a father. If you just need to be a mother, you're just a mother. If you just need to be a gardener, you're just a gardener. Like that, if the personality was highly flexible, like water, then personality is not a problem. But that's not the way that we are. You know, we are very prejudiced, and that's the problem with human beings. We want the whole ocean to come to us, not understanding that it's the human being who must become receptive to the ocean. So, and I want to explain something, because, you know, we've given such great importance to pleasure in our lives. Freedom is also freedom from being a slave to pleasant experiences. Just look at this. The drunkard who's getting totally drunk in the bar, it's a very pleasurable experience for him. For some time, his worries have disappeared, his anxieties has disappeared, his personality has loosened up, and at least temporarily, he's happy. But he's deeply enslaved in the process at the same time. A drug addict, again, he's getting high on waves of bliss, but deeply enslaved to the process at the same time. So, even what is pleasant, if we are attached to it, it's capable of creating suffering for us. So freedom means there's a silence within you where, regardless of what is pleasant or unpleasant, that silence remains undisturbed. Does that mean that life will not become an expression of joy? No. I don't know, have anybody here heard of Gautama the Buddha? Of course you know Gautama the Buddha. Have you heard of Gautama Buddha?
Oh yeah.
The Buddha?
Right, of course, yes.
Yeah? You've not heard of Buddha?
Buddha.
Buddha. Taban inti. Buddha, he said, Nirvana is the highest kind of happiness a human being can experience. So it is possible, yes, for 24 hours you can be in an ongoing state of bliss. But it's not because you're running after it. It's not because you're hankering after it. It's not because you have so many attachments and there's this target in the distance that you want to hit. It's just the opposite. Because your mind has dropped all attachment, because you've dropped all cravings, you are totally fulfilled as you are. Nothing more is needed. Just if this craving activity of the mind stops, then within yourself, you're totally contented. That's a different kind of happiness. But right now, as human beings, we are always in pursuit of happiness, trying to make arrangements, planning for happiness. So, I've said it before that this pursuit of happiness has created such slavery in humanity. So let's forget about happiness. Let's cultivate that things within you which will lead you towards happiness. So rather than desperately running after happiness, according to me, a human being should develop the faculties of his own insight, wisdom, and knowledge. And then out of that, then freedom happens. Then happiness happens. So I see this is the problem. People are seeking well-being, but without making an effort to understand what are the obstacles that are functioning in their lives. This is a very unreasonable, impractical approach. So don't figure out where to go. You don't know where to go. You're traveling through unknown territory. You don't know where to go. Only thing that's available to you right now is obstacles. Understanding these obstacles. So that's how spiritual growth happens. You understand what are the obstacles right now that are manifesting in your life. Through the insight, those obstacles, you find they disappear. A new range of obstacles disappears. Great. That's great. Because these obstacles teach you certain fundamental lessons. These obstacles, if they are approached consciously, this becomes the very stuff of insight. I don't see conflict as a problem, actually. If you approach your conflict unconsciously, then it's a burden. It's like you're carrying a cross on your shoulders. But if we approach this conflict consciously, then this very same conflict becomes opportunity to deepen your understanding, to deepen your insight. So it's not my wish that any human being is free of suffering until he's prepared for it. So understanding those obstacles, a new set of obstacles arises, and like this, you're growing from one dimension to the next. So what you're telling me was earlier is that I'm having trouble with my thought processes. What we need is to have an understanding of what are the obstacles. Why are these thought processes creating a problem? Now, as we said, if your mind was bursting forth with thoughts, but your clarity was preserved, the thought processes would not be a problem. So how to preserve this clarity? That's the essential thing that we want. Because, in yoga, sometimes it's been talked about coming to a state of thoughtlessness in deep meditation. The most that this can ever do is temporarily relieve your sufferings. But I assume, as a human being, you have to live on this planet to your dying day. So what are you going to do? Live 24 hours in a state of thoughtlessness? As a human being, you have to get up, do ordinary things. After all, what is your life except a collection of very simple activities you're doing from moment to moment? Waking up in the morning, having your breakfast, changing your clothes, having a bath, then changing your clothes, going to work, making a living for yourself. If you have children, coming home, taking care of the children, so on. Our life is just a collection of simple activities, moment to moment. So assume for the rest of your life you will have to put your thought processes to use. Now let's just look into how can we put this mind and its thought processes to use without becoming a slave to the process. Suppose, like what you're saying, I'm having too many thoughts. Suppose you had so many thoughts, but those thoughts were very creative, very organized, very efficient. Too much thoughts, would it be a problem? It's not about the number. It's not about the number. You have just one thought in your mind. Suppose you have just one thought in your mind. You cannot let go of it. That's also suffering. It's not a question of the number. A small handful, a medium handful, a huge handful. The basic problem remains the same, that you're unable to have these thought processes without losing your clarity. So that's what we want. That's what it means to be meditative. Active mind or silent mind, you are meditative. So this is why I know you did some training in the Zen meditation centers. This is one thing they're trying to teach you, that it reminds me of a statement of a Zen master whose name was Hakuin. He said, meditation in action is much more superior to just meditation in sitting. Because think about it, when you're active in the world, your mind has a million opportunities to become disturbed. So if you can be thrown in this chaos, still the silence is preserved. That means your silence has really solid roots. So this silence, you cannot test it well if you're living somewhere up in the Himalayas somewhere. In the Himalayas, actually, you've heard people talking like this, I want to go live in the Himalayas or the cave somewhere, be removed from the society, everything will become peaceful. Just think about this. Most people, if they just have to sleep one night on a park bench, they'll be complaining. Imagine you go live in the Himalayas. Now you have to figure out how are you going to survive, where to get food, where to get drink. You're at the mercy of your environment. You don't have shelter, maybe it will start raining. Or you get a sickness, there's no doctor around. Actually, if you go live in the Himalayas, unless you get your survival skills up to speed, it'll be even more suffering. But I know the intention. This was the intention of yogis. Why they went and lived in the Himalayas, why they did these things. Because since now your well-being is already very fragile, so much determined by what's happening on the outside, it can be convenient if you can minimize the distractions and then turn inwards. It can be helpful. Yes, it can be helpful. But the peace that you might experience in the Himalayas it has to be put to the test. You need to be put in situations where the mind can become disturbed. The best place for that is in the noise of the marketplace. So if you're walking in the noise of the marketplace, still within yourself, it's as if you're in the caves of the Himalayas. This is true freedom. So that's why Hakuin said, meditation in action is much more superior to meditation in stillness. So I would like that to also become your experience, that you can be highly active, with your mind very active, but you're not disturbed.
Indeed.